Good evening, and welcome to Many Voices, One Spirit, our monthly webinar. I am Kristen Harlin, your annual Conference Lady Servant Ministries Director, kind of helping to fill in this evening. And I am going to be here with three amazing authors in our annual conference, Kris Mayberry, Reverend Dr. Sonja Tobey, and Reverend Michael Carpenter. And so we're going to start with Kris Mayberry this evening.
Hi, thanks for inviting me. I appreciate the opportunity to write about my book, Prayers for Virtuous Living.
And Kris Mayberry is a pastor in the Oklahoma Conference. She's currently serving at Pryor UMC. She also has a background in education. She and her husband Scott have 4 adult children and a son-in-law plus 3 grandsons. She's a graduate of St. Paul School of Theology and a proud member of the Muskogee Creek Nation. So welcome, Kris.
Thank
Can
you.
you can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your journey in ministry this evening?
Sure, I can. I was born and raised in Okmulgee, Oklahoma, and my husband and I and our family, we were attending Okmulgee First United Methodist Church when I received an invitation from Steve Sigmund, and he asked me if I would be interested in taking training for to become a lay servant. And so he explained to me that it was a 2-year process. And so I took training the first year and received my certification to be able to fill the pulpit when my pastor was unable to be there. And then I went back the second year so that I could receive certification so that I could fill the pulpit in any of the churches within the district. What was in that training that second year that Rob Harris, who was the pastor at Moore, I think at that time, and he was leading a training, and one of the things he had us do was we each had to give like a 5-minute sermon. And so when I gave my sermon, I was speaking about my son Trent and him being at a track meet and God speaking into my spirit. And as I finished the message, there was just this holy hush in the room. There's this holy hush. And I didn't know if I had done well or if I had not done well. I couldn't tell because everybody was just so silent. And then I went and sat down. Well, Rob came and he got down on one knee beside my chair and he looked at me and he said, "Would you have been able to have done that 2 years ago?" And I said, "No, I don't think I could have done that 2 years ago." And he said, "I want you to imagine what God's going to do in your life in the next 2 years." And within the next 2 years, I had received an invitation to become a local pastor. And
Wow.
so I started off as bivocational. I was teaching for Morris Public Schools. I was teaching middle school science, and I was serving the small church at Schulter. And I did that for 2 years. And then Tish Malloy called me and she said, "Are you ready to go into full-time ministry?" And I really, really was. I could teach and keep up all of the grading and all of the meetings and all of the conversations with parents. I could do all of those things and I could pastor the church at the same time. But over those 2 years, what I saw was that my teaching was keeping me from being the pastor that I wanted to be. And so that 2 years really helped me to see what is it to, discern what is it that you really want. And I discerned I really wanted to be a minister. So Tish invited me to move up to the Enid area, and I served Drummond and Wacomas. So this 2-point charge. Well, COVID hits. And, we're not able to see our people. We're all scrambling. We're all trying to learn how to go online. We're learning about audio. We're learning about, hair and makeup and lighting and all of this kind of stuff. And racking our brains on how to connect with our people. And I thought, you know what?
Right.
Almost all of them have email. I can email them. And so I just started during the season of Lent, I started emailing them a prayer every day. Just started
Wow.
just started doing that and just started collecting and just writing these prayers that God gave me. And then I was moved to Holdenville to serve the church there. And when I was there, God laid on my heart. He was like, listen, you need to start a podcast. Those prayers that I gave you, I still have work for you to do with them. So I started a podcast through Spotify. Looks like my, hope you can see me. It looks like my Wi-Fi might be a little unstable. But so I did that for a little while until I started seminary. And then those demands of seminary, I couldn't keep that up. So I kind of laid it aside again. And then God knocked on that door of my heart again. And he's like, listen, I have more to do with those prayers. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And, and God said, I want you to publish them. I want it to be a book. I want people, there are people out there that need to read these words that you've written. And I really hesitated in doing that because that's a big step. Writing is one thing, but publishing is a different realm. And you really open yourself up for criticism, right? And so it's like, I don't know if I want to do that or not. And one night, God just really got a hold of me and he said, listen, those prayers that I gave you, that's not really your work. I inspired you to write that.
Wow.
That's words that I need out in the world for people to read. Now, if you don't want to publish it, that's okay. But I'm going to give that message to somebody else. And so I really had to make a decision, like really quick. I'm like, God's moving on this. So I've got to decide. And so I I immediately I went to my laptop. I just opened it up. I started researching publishers. And the first one that came up was Christian Faith Publishing. And it had like a little link. It said, put your manuscript here. So I did it. I sent it and I was like, okay, God, I did what you asked me to do. Never really expected to hear from them again. But 2 weeks later, I got a call and they were like, we love it and we want to publish it. We want to publish your book. And so then we went through the whole process of editing, and that's a whole nother story. That's a whole nother story. But so that's kind of my journey of how I started ministry and how the book and the writing ministry kind of developed out of that.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. And thank you for answering God's call in that moment. I love to hear call stories. They are just amazing. And especially yours about prayer and how the inspiration came for the book was directly from your prayer life with God. That is amazing. So, how does your book help someone who maybe is having trouble praying at all? We all go through those times in our life that are kind of bumpy. Do you have any words of wisdom on that, or where we can find that in the book, or how the book could help?
Yeah, I think the prayers in my book are guided prayers. There's many, many different ways to pray, and there's different kinds of prayer. And often when people hear the word prayer, we automatically think of extemporaneous. So prayer that just arises out of our soul with whatever it is that's going on. So guided prayers are generally prayers that are written, and they're going to be prayers that remind us of things that we may not automatically think of as we're praying extemporaneously. And so these prayers that I have written as a guided prayer, what they do is they really help us to reflect on how we're living and the character that is developing within us through our faith walk. And that can be difficult to do because we often pray out of a need that we have. And so it could be maybe a problem that we are facing. And I'm telling you, God loves those prayers and God honors those prayers. But prayer is more than that. It's more than the laundry list of God, here's what I need from you, right? Please fill this. Prayer is character development. Spending time with the creator of the universe is going to change you. It is going to humble you. It is going to give you wisdom and insight of things that you could possibly have no way of knowing with your human mind, right? And so my prayers help to get you to that place. John Wesley wrote about our our discipleship path. He called it sanctification, the process of sanctification. Prayer leads us along that path through the Holy Spirit. And my book helps us to do that because it helps us to focus on my character and how am I living? Am I being courageous? Am I being kind? Am I being flexible? Am I being courteous to people? So my prayers help us to really, really focus on the character aspects of our spiritual journey. Um, it it also structured prayers or guided prayers are something we can really cling on to when life is chaotic, right? When life is chaotic, when life is spinning out of control, when we don't even have the words within us to speak to God, we don't even know how to broach with God because our pain is so deep or because we are so confused with what's going on. Guided prayers, written prayers, like the prayers in my book, can help give structure to our life. They remind us also that God meets us exactly where we are. We don't have to have it all together. And in fact, you'll see that when you read my prayers. My prayers are very truthful in, God, here is where I am and here is where I want to be. And so it reminds us that God meets us where we are, and it just reconnects us daily with being in touch with God, not just during the quiet times, but during our work, during our relationship decisions that we are making, just that daily rhythm of life.
And you've already kind of touched on it, but I'm going to ask you a more little specific. Why did you focus on virtues in particular? And what are some of the virtues in which you truly focus on in your book?
Um, One of the reasons that I focus on virtues is from my many conversations as a pastor with people. Um, One of the things that I saw was that people were seeing prayer as transactional with God. Um, that, if I say the right words in the right way, if I approach God with this right formula, then maybe God will grant me what I want. And so I focused on the virtues because I wanted people to see that prayer is a relationship. It is a conversation. It's talking for me, talking with God is like I was talking with my grandma Ruby. She was the person who 100% her love for me was unconditional, unlike anyone I've ever known in my life. And so I wanted people to see that prayer is being in the presence of this unconditional love, this spirit who loves us and who wants us to love more perfectly. And we love more perfectly when we are practicing those virtues. So Galatians 5:22, shares with us that we'll know that people are Christian by their fruits, the fruits of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness. How do we get there? We get there by virtuous living, by practicing the virtues, by asking God to in help us to become stronger in those areas. Some of the ones that I particularly like to live by, and I think as Christians all of us, we have to focus on integrity, right? We have to um, we have to let the words that we say match our actions of how we live. We have to have integrity in living in a way that even if no one is watching, we're still going to do the right thing because we understand that our life is a reflection of God. And even if no other human can see us, God knows, he sees. And so integrity is important. Humility, being honest with yourself about where you are, that we do have faults, that we sometimes miss the mark, and we need the guidance of um, our Savior to share with us where we've missed the mark, where we've done things that have hurt ourselves or where we have hurt others. So humility is a big virtue. Perseverance. Man, you're a Christian. You put yourself out there as a Christian. You give yourself that title of Christian. You're going to get some pushback, right? The enemy's going to push back. The enemy is going to put things in your life.
Absolutely.
Yeah, put things in your life to make you think, I don't have time to do this, right? I don't have time to do God's work. So perseverance, pushing through, knowing victory's already won. Christ has already won the victory, right? Good is going to overcome. You just have to endure. You just have to persevere. You just have to keep on going till it's okay, right? Keep on going till you get to the okay, because eventually you're going to get to the okay. So, and then courage is another one. As Christians, often we don't want to rock the boat, but we are called to stand for justice. We are called to point out when we see things that are unfair and that are hurtful to people, especially groups that are underrepresented. And we have been given many of us, we are living these entitled lives for a reason so that we can speak up and be courageous in order to help others. So those are some of the virtues that I really, really like to share.
So we have about 2 minutes. So how do you envision individuals and churches using your book?
All right. So my book can be used for people's individual prayer time, but also it could be used within small groups. You could do a structured study over each of the virtues. In my book, I quote, well, I don't quote, but I cite a scripture that goes along with each prayer. Also, something that I do is I am developing an online community called the Virtuous Living Community, and I send out an email weekly, no charge at all, that is based on one of the prayers in my book. And if you'd like to access that, you just have to send me an email at authorkrismayberry@gmail.com. You can also follow me online on Facebook and Instagram at author Kris Mayberry. So there are going to be other tools and techniques and things like that that you can use to help you to incorporate the virtues, virtuous living, virtuous prayers in your life.
Well, thank you very much, Reverend Kris Mayberry. It has been a pleasure talking with you today, and I am sure a bunch of us will be reaching out to email you and to be able to see your different work with prayer. If they wanted to order your book, where would we order that at?
All right, you can order it from Amazon or Barnes and Noble, and it is also available
Okay.
On Kindle.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much. And
Thank
we
you.
really appreciate you being here today. And I look forward to
Thank
seeing you in
you.
the future. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
And next we have Reverend Dr. Sonja Tobey. She serves as the Southeast District Superintendent in the Oklahoma Conference after serving local churches for over 20 years. She and her husband Mike have 3 children and live in Shawnee. And she has a doctorate in ministry from Phillips Theological Seminary. She has currently written 2 books for us. Well, welcome, Reverend Dr. Sonja Tobey. How are you?
Thank you. I'm good.
Good. So you've written two books, one on preaching, which I'm
Uh-huh.
very familiar with, uh, and the other on the ministry at the time of death. So let's talk about your preaching book first.
Okay.
What was your inspiration for this book?
I um I had been asked to teach a preaching workshop for laity, and I was really frustrated by the limitations that was placed on me, things that I could expect or not expect. And I had started my doctorate program in homiletic and preaching, and thought I was going with a different direction. But the frustration that I felt from what I wanted to teach and what I was told I could teach to laity had me complaining to my advisor. And my advisor goes, I think you have your project. And so my doctorate work is a curriculum on teaching preaching to lay preachers and local pastors. And I did that for 5 years, and taught many of people who are still laity and continuing to fill pulpits, and some that went the local pastor route. And there's only so much that you can do. The curriculum that I had put together was a class that I could teach. And so the next step seemed to be writing a book. And I'm like, okay, I'll write a book. And much like Kris, I didn't rush to do it. And I had told Dr. Doug Poe from Phillips that I had planned to do this as I had graduated from Phillips. I told him that a little light reading was on the library shelves and that he could go pull out my doctoral paper on this. And he did. And so then he kept asking when. So he helped me get it done. Kristen, you helped me get it done. And so that's kind of, I just wanted to give laity, local pastors, anybody who hadn't had a preaching class that was asked to step into a pulpit, some tools to use for their sake and for the sake of those who had to listen to them. So that's kind of how that came about.
So, how do you see this book being used by those who preach on a regular basis, and even possibly those that don't, that are not going to preach on a regular basis?
It's a good reference book. It's one of those things that you can pull off the shelf. The class can go through the book and cover all of the things, but it's something that you can refer back to later. It has exercises in it that can kind of help you work toward um, a little more moving toward perfection, in the craft of preaching. If you preach every Sunday, you just have more opportunity to practice the delivery part of it. But even if you don't preach every Sunday, it's a good practical way of going through the Bible, doing in-depth Bible study, and then you'll have some stuff already kind of done when you have the opportunity to preach. Because quite often lay preachers preach, and are not given a lot of heads up, not a lot of time to do that. So anytime that you can already have some stuff kind of put together is going to be beneficial for those who have to preach at the last minute. So,
Absolutely. In a worship service, why is the preaching moment such an important one?
that's an interesting question. I do not believe that the preaching moment is the most important part of the worship service. I believe that the preaching moment is a part of a whole worship service that God speaks to us through music, through prayer, through silence, through the message being brought. And I just believe that to do honor to the word that God has whispered to us, to kind of quote Margie Suhaki, but this understanding that God has given us a word, and we convey that to those who are there to hear, in a way that's, it's not about entertainment. It's not about you know anything about the preacher. It's about conveying a message that God has given you. And it should be done with humility. It's not the most important thing in the service. It should be, a part of the service, and the service should work together. But um, I digress on that part. But that's one of the things. It's not the most important part. It is a part of the worship service. And it should be given the amount of humility that it deserves to.
Thank you so much for sharing that with all of us. A lot of people sometimes think that they come just for the preaching or just for the message. And it is important to know that we are there for the service, to be in community for all of the parts, not just one particular part of our worship service. So I'm going to kind of transition us now, because your other book actually seems much more personal. Tell us some more about this one.
So I had been in ministry for about 10 years, and I was going through a season that I had started keeping a blog of what I called musings, just thoughts and ideas that I would kind of put out there online. And in 2010, my youngest was graduating from high school. My father was actively dying, and I was 2 hours away packing boxes to move. And I would, there was a couple of weeks that I would pack a couple of boxes and then drive down to see my father. And I processed a lot of that through the blog. And so when my mother died, it was a different kind of grief, but it was grief. And I processed that a little bit more on the blog. I kind of referenced back to some of the stuff that I had already written, but my relationship with my mother was very different than my relationship with my father. And so it was a different kind of feeling in that. And so I had kind of, I won't say it was exactly kind of like what Kris had with God saying, if you don't publish this, I will get somebody else to. But it was very much a nudging of the Spirit to go ahead and to put it into a format that is readable. It's not an instruction book on how to sit by the bedside, but it is just inviting somebody on my journey as I sat by those bedsides.
So you've said it's not you call it a testimony, not a manual on grief. What will readers find that might help them understand their own story better through your book?
My sister lost her husband 3 years ago, and she has a copy of it. And one of the things that she's commented on is it's different when you lose a spouse, and I'm sure it is, or a child, or a friend. Grief is not universal it's not the same for everybody, but it's a universal experience that we all have. And so in that, in my processing through not just the grief that I felt as a daughter, but also in sitting beside bedsides of beloved people in my congregation that I loved, and being there for them as a pastor, and showing up for that. I just think that it's an invitation to walk alongside it might speak in ways that I don't know. And I don't pretend to know how God works. It's mysterious. But I do think that perhaps some of my understanding would be helpful for people. My father taught me faith by showing me faith. And when he was dying, it was very much the same thing. And that's kind of laid out in the book. And I learned a lot about grief at that time. And I also learned ways or things about grief that I hadn't even thought to ask. So it's not a manual on how to be with people in grief necessarily. But it is an invitation to walk alongside to see how others have been impacted, and it might speak to you in a way that you just hadn't thought of yet. Everybody grieves differently. So,
Well, thank you so much for being willing to share that vulnerable time in your life and your experience in pastoral care. That is so important to all of us. And I really appreciate that. Uh, but I have to know, are you writing more books?
that's a great question. I suppose when there's divine inspiration and the Holy Spirit lays something on my heart, there might be another book. It's not nearly as terrifying to publish a second book. So it was something that was a little more um, comfortable, but I don't have any plans just yet. I don't have anything to say just yet. So maybe my
Well,
memoirs someday.
well, we'll wait for the Holy Spirit to blow where it will and see what happens. So, what do you like to read for fun? Do you have any book recommendations for us?
Oh, when I was in seminary, I read so many textbooks that after that, I just refused to read anything that was important to the brain. So I say that much of my reading for pleasure is what I call mind candy. It's really easy to listen to and to enjoy. It has no nutritional value whatsoever. So I like cozy mysteries. I don't like anything gory. Not huge fan of, mushy romances. That's not me. But I do like cozy mysteries. And I like Richard Osman. His Thursday Murder Club books are very good. And he has a new series out called We Solve Murders, is the first book in that series. And I recommend that. I just have others that I just kind of go through the series, and anything set in Britain is great. So that's kind of where mine goes.
Awesome. Awesome. So, if we wanted to get copies of your books
Uh-huh.
today, I know where to get them, but can you tell everybody where we could get them?
They're on Amazon. You can look it up through my name or Call to the Journey or At the Bedside. And so those are the ways that you can locate those books. And they are both available on Kindle as well, ebook format.
Or maybe look for a lay servant training near you.
Or maybe look for a lay servant training near you. I bring both of my books wherever I go. They're generally in the trunk of my car somewhere. So if you see me, you can ask. So
Well, thank you so much, Reverend Dr. Tobey, for spending your evening with us and sharing about yourself and your books. And we just really appreciate everything you've done for our annual conference. So thank you.
thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yes. And now we're going to be hearing from Reverend Michael Carpenter.
Greetings, I'm Derek Belace, and I'm here with Michael Carpenter, and we're going to finish up this webinar this evening. Neither Michael and I are available to be live tonight, so we recorded this a couple weeks ago because Michael is one of our 3 conference authors who have authored books in the last couple years that we're talking to on our webinar this evening. Michael is the pastor at Lost Creek United Methodist Church in Stillwater, active leader in our conference. Michael, why don't you tell us quickly before we get started about your family, because you got some beautiful children.
Oh, thank you, Derek. Yes. So my wife and I live in Stillwater. We've got 5 kids. An oldest one who is going into 4th grade, and then 2 sets of twins underneath him, 2 going into 1st grade, and 2 who are turning 3 later this summer.
Okay, so you stay busy with family. That's where we're both at right now.
Yes.
Having fun. All right, well, you've written 2 books. So tell us first about the first one you wrote about the Nicene Creed, which I know had to do with the anniversary, I think, of the Creed when that book came
Yes.
out.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, the first book is called We Believe, How the Nicene Creed Can Deepen Your Faith. It came out last May of 25, just in time for the 1700th anniversary of the Council of Nicaea, which formulated the Creed. And so it is a 6-chapter, kind of 6-session Bible study that goes kind of line by line through the Creed, unpacking some of the parts that are a little harder to understand, a little complex, and then just unpacking it for folks to see how it can transform their own faith. Why it was important, why those lines were in there, what it means for our faith that we believe these things, and then some things, especially toward the end, about how we can bring that back into our own personal faith lives and in the lives of our local churches.
Sure, you intersperse some personal stories I know in your books, but was it just the 1700th anniversary that prompted you to do it? Did you have some kind of interest on your own? I mean, why that book at that time in addition to the anniversary?
So the interest was I'm an inveterate over planner, something I think you and a lot of the listeners here can probably get on board with too. So I like to plan sermons well out in advance, and I was doing this. It was actually fall of 2023. I was kind of looking ahead and had seen somehow that 2025 would be the 1700th anniversary, and thought, oh, maybe for Lent I'll do something on the Nicene Creed. And so started poking around, and I couldn't find anything on Cokesbury's website, Abingdon, even other denominational publications and publishing houses, and thought, well, this is really important. This, is the first ecumenical creed, first ecumenical council. It is a really important thing, and so I think we should have a book out there. And that's why I wrote one up and submitted to Abingdon, and that's kind of how it started.
Okay, so maybe that's a little bit about the next question I was going to ask you, is sort of what inspired you as a pastor to be a writer? And I asked that question because I think back on my own career in ministry. You write a sermon every week. If you write them out 8 or 10 pages, many of our pastors, or most of our pastors, frankly, in some ways are authors. They're writing all the time. They're writing newsletter articles and all kinds of things. But that's different than writing a book and putting the topic and sticking with the theme and all that. So tell us a bit about that process for you and the inspiration to be a writer, pastor writer.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think what you said is absolutely right. I remember Dr. Elaine Robinson, who I had in seminary at St. Paul, here in our conference, told us that in class one day. I remember, that every pastor is an author. We write all the things that you talked about and more. I mean, it is important. What led me to want to write some of the curriculum and the resources then that I've done with these first two books is I wanted to be able to really help resource the local church on my own and others beyond mine, to be able to give a resource on things that I think are important or valuable, things that would be a helpful resource for people's individual faith, for our identity as Methodists, for our witness in local churches, and just wanting to write things to help folks with those.
Yeah. So picking up the missing element for the Nicene Creed book was some of the inspiration. You were looking for something.
Yes, and we didn't have it.
there,
Yeah.
And so you're like, I'll write something and think about that way. That's kind of different from your second book, The Four
Yes.
Alls, all about Wesley. And man, you just search out books about Wesley, and there's so many. And so, what brought you to the idea around this theological position of the Four Alls and that lens for your second book?
Yeah. So it was a really funny story how I stumbled upon the Four Alls, which I'll just list briefly here. The Four Alls, this is a century-old summary of our Wesleyan Methodist distinctives. All must be saved, then all can be saved, then all can know they are saved, and finally all could be saved to the uttermost. Those are kind of what sets us apart as Methodists, as Wesleyans. And I happened upon that randomly in an old seminary doctrine textbook, Randy Maddox's Responsible Grace. It's buried in an endnote in there that has happened upon, and thought, well, this is really something. And I'd never heard it before. Reached out to several of my friends who paid better attention in lectures than I did at seminary. They hadn't heard it either. And so thought, I think this, and kind of the link for it of why I wanted then this to be the second book, is I think this helps to bridge the gap of Methodists. We are so known for kind of what we do and who we are. Those open hearts, open minds, open doors, the What If Love campaign. I mean, it's all about this. This is who we are as a church. We're people who love. We're people of grace. We feed people. We clothe people. That's who we are and what we do. The Four Alls then kind of comes underneath that. It says, and this is why we do those things. These are those core foundational doctrines that lead us to those things of who we are. Because I think that's what I've seen in my ministry is something that some even lifelong Methodists are missing. They can say, well, I know I don't believe in predestination. I know I'm not Calvinist. I know I'm not Catholic. but then I really don't know what it is that Methodists
Yeah.
believe, or I know, but I can't articulate it well. And the Four Alls is just a really, really clean, memorable package for those distinctives.
Yeah, this is very, very personal, but I appreciate the book. I read it. It's a great book. But the first time I heard the Four Alls mentioned actually was during disaffiliation in our conference, and it was such a misuse and a hurtful way of using it that when your book came out, I was again I read it kind of in one setting because it was such a reset,
Mm.
right? For this for the like you, I didn't hear it in seminary. I don't remember if I did. I went back through my doctorate notes even after your book came out to see like, man, did I just miss, Hal and I talking about that? And so I found it so helpful that I can see so many ways as a programmatic person in our annual conference that it could be used, certainly servant ministry and all kinds of other ways. But how do you envision the book being used by congregations as they delve deeper into their own understanding of Methodism and their Wesleyan identity? I mean, it's one thing to read a book and then put it on the shelf, but how do you see it being used by our congregations, lived out? How are you doing that at Lost Creek?
Yeah, we're actually right now halfway through using it as a worship series. The folks of the church asked me to do it, and so I did. We're doing that now for our July series. But it is helpful, I think, especially post disaffiliation season. As you said, there were so many. My home church disaffiliated. Some churches I'd served previously had votes for disaffiliation that and had heard through all those episodes. There were accusations labeled about what we do and
Yeah.
what we don't believe. And so this is a really positive thing to put forward. It says, this is what we believe. This is who we are. And so churches can use it, I think, really effectively as a small group study. There's discussion questions at the end of every chapter for each of the four alls to help guide discussion. And I think it's also really helpful, and the good folks at Abingdon and Cokesbury, I think, priced it helpfully as well. It's under $10. So it's also, I think, a really good resource for like a membership class or a confirmation class to be able to buy a couple copies that you're able to put in the hands of everyone who either is joining or has questions about joining a Methodist church. I know most
Yeah,
of our
again,
growth at Lost Creek are from folks who haven't been Methodist.
right.
And so to say,
Yeah.
this is who we are, this is what we believe, is helpful.
And I just, again, as we're always trying to put out resources as a conference and put our stamp on resources and what's helpful. This would be among those, not just because you wrote it and you're here. So there is a contextual piece of understanding, Oklahomans and all of that, but just because of the solid scholarship that's there, but also the very applicable, easy to understand, and get, a lay people can get through. You don't have to have a seminary degree to do that. I mean,
Uh-huh.
we've talked about not hearing it in seminary. Well, that's great. So you can hear about it in your local church.
Hmm.
So again, another highly encouraged resource, just like the ones that Sonja and Kris talked about in their interviews. How does the writing process, how did writing these books deepen your faith? I mean, what's happening to you as you're doing this work?
Yeah, I mean, it has been a lot of fun. It's been certainly almost whiplash between the two books. For the first one, it was really reading a lot of church history books from, those conversations 1,700 years ago. And for the Four Alls was a lot more, reading Wesley's sermons and his writings and kind of bringing that into today. But for both of them, what was really impactful for me is, like Wesley talked about, he desired plain truth for plain people. That some of the things, you and I and other pastors, some lay servants, lay ministers, lay speakers, will read these required textbooks, and then our work is to translate them
Hmm.
for everybody, to make it of value for folks just beyond us. You don't need to sit in an office, lined with bookshelves, to be able to get something out of it. But that takes work to be able to write something then that has that appeal, and that's been a really, I think, a really helpful and really impactful. Really impactful practice for me of being able to take some of the things Wesley writing in his English of 3 centuries ago and translate that into something how we'd talk here in 2026 Oklahoma was really
Yeah,
impactful for me.
yeah, that's great. All right, final question. These books, they weigh heavily on your church work. And if you look, I mean, I'm in my office, but I have the blurred screen on. I mean, I'm surrounded by books too. I read lots of books, heavily weighted to my work, as you're probably in the church. But what do you like to read for fun? Because I know you have some fun books that you read as well.
For fun, I mean, a lot of it is, I don't, what do they say when you turn 30, you have to pick, either World War II, Civil War, or ancient Rome. I've picked ancient Rome. I like, the Roman history stuff, but I'll give a quick shout out too. A book I'm enjoying right now is a new book by one of the pastors in our conference. Jonathan Kleinsmith has published a novel, science fiction type novel called Virtus Ascendi, and it's just kind of a sci-fi type philosophical book that I've been really enjoying. So I'll plug that here.
Yeah, we can plug Jonathan. In fact, we don't only have to talk about church books on
Church books, yeah. So
webinar. We
that's,
can
yeah.
bring Jonathan on to hear about his book. Yeah, I've been seeing his publications, and he's a super cool guy with all kinds of interests. So I'm sure it's great. Well, Michael, thank you for your work, not only in our conference as a pastor, but for giving yourself and writing these two pieces that again are so accessible to laity and clergy in our conference, and to being willing to offer yourself. And I wanted you to introduce yourself and about your family because you got 5 kids and you got a wife and you got a church. And yet, this is another way that we offer ourselves. And I say the same as we conclude this webinar this evening, even though this part's the recorded part and not live. But the same can be said for Sonja and for Kris, and for the ways that they've done that, for Paul Hamilton and Elaine Robinson and so many other folks in our conference who've given themselves in this way of writing pieces for us to be able to use in our ministry and in our personal life and growth and in the life of our faith community. So since this is the end of the evening, I thank all of you for joining us for the July edition of Many Voices, One Spirit. I can tell you that we've got August and September and October planned, so please watch for the upcoming topics. You're going to find those super interesting third Sunday evening of every month, 6 p.m. And of course, you can find them on the conference website in recording. Thank you all for joining us this evening, and for Kristen Harlin for being the host for the first 2/3 of this. Thank you, Michael, for making time for us. We hope you all have a great evening.